Thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Secure Connections podcast, brought to you by IoTSSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. As always, I'm your host, Brian Sherman, Content Director for IoTSSA. And joining me today is Rob Rae, Vice President of Business Development for Datto. Rob has more than 25 years experience in IT services sales and other B2B activities with 100% channel-focused organizations. Over that time, he's directly helped scores of VAR solution providers and MSPs achieve their ultimate business goals. As Vice President of Business Development at Datto, Rob's role is to oversee many different aspects of the company's programs, including community events, marketing development funds, vendor management, and the Partner Advisory Board. He also plays an instrumental role in Datto's go-to-market strategy. As most of you know, Rob has received numerous awards and recognitions in the channel, including being named a CRN Channel Chief every year since joining Datto. He's also been included in many industry lists as a top executive and influencer, has been a leader of CompTIA's Vendor Advisory Council and very active in the community, and is a member of the Exchange Vendor Advisory Board. With that, let me welcome Rob Rae back to the Secure Connections podcast. Hey, Rob.
Thanks, Brian. Happy to be here.
Very good. Happy to be here as well. It's a Monday for those of you that are listening to this on another day, but it's a joyous day to get a chance to talk to Rob. First off, I know it's been a little while since we checked in, but I wanted to find out what's going on with Datto in 2019.
Lots. there is a ton of stuff that we're working on. We've obviously throughout 2017, 2018 made some acquisitions and a lot of hardening of different product streams. And I think that we've got many different product streams between PSA and RMM, BDR and SaaS protection and networking. So for us, it's like, we got about 5 balls in the air and all of them are moving pretty rapidly forward. So lots of really cool things that we've got going on, lots of cool things that we continue to work on. And the great part about it, it's all still being fueled by a fast and rapidly growing managed services market.
Awesome. And I'm sure that one of the events, I know DattoCon gets a lot of recognition. It seems to be growing every year. Can you give us a little background on the events?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, would love to. So DattoCon, in essence, is our user conference. It's a combination of both DattoCon as well as ACL, the old Autotask Community Live, which was an iconic event in our industry for about 12 years, and DattoCon I think had been running for about 5. So those two events combined. But the great part about it is it's not just Datto partners. It's the largest MSP conference, period. So it's all managed service providers from all over the world. We were doing, one big event in the United States. Last year was in Austin, Texas. This year it's in June 2019, San Diego. San Diego, we're forecasting right now. We've got the Grand Hyatt right down on the ocean there. And it should be probably about 2,300 MSPs. Probably add another 500 staff and vendors in there. So we're pretty close to 3,000 people in San Diego in June. On top of that, the one that we do in Europe used to be kind of like a one-day event where people would come in and spend the day with us and learn what's new at Datto. That's in October. But in 2018, we actually did a big 2.5-day event in Barcelona. Not only did we get more MSPs to show up at the event and the survey and the post-event feedback was unbelievably good. So we're doing that again this year. 2019 is going to be in October in Paris. That's going to be about 1,000 MSPs, probably 1,300 people total. And the great part about it, Brian, is I don't know why, but we're now starting to see obviously more Europeans coming into the United States, but we're also starting to see a lot of Americans head over to Europe. And these two events are basically our big events to release new products and features and benefits and create a lot of education around the MSPs. All the on-stage content is delivered by MSPs. So it's definitely more of an MSP conference, more so than just a user conference, and one that we're very proud of.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a much worse place to go than Paris or San Diego. So
there are many worse places than those two, that is for sure.
Yeah. Whoever picked out locations this year, thumbs up to that group. Awesome.
That's me. It's all me. It's basically cities I like. Where does Rob want to go this week? So.
Cool. Well, you mentioned to me too that you're working on a paper, kind of an overall paper that kind of focuses on some of the opportunities in the channel too. Do you want to dive into that a little bit for us and give me some background?
Yeah. So and we've seen it, and it's in the news almost every single day. Is the private equity investment and the venture capital investment that's coming into our space. Datto itself. I mean, we sold our business to a private equity company called Vista. We did that back late 2017, early 2018. So, what's interesting is that there's a ton, like billions of dollars that are being floated into the MSP channel right now. And when you look at the maturity cycle of MSPs worldwide, obviously the U.S., for those of you that never leave the U.S., might be happy to hear the U.S. is actually leading the way. I just got back from Germany, and Germany's still a little bit behind, but they're keen on switching from a traditional break fix to managed services. So why are all these billions of dollars and more going to be coming into our space? And it's the whole outsource IT thing. Small medium businesses are not going to be handling IT in-house anymore. It's just not a thing. It can't be a thing. And if we think traditionally about how technology has been done, it's been relatively simple. Whereas these days, it's more complicated. When you add cloud technology in, when you add the Internet of Things in, when you add security around all those things, now all of a sudden technology becomes super complicated, even for a small business. So having to deal with that in-house, hiring somebody in-house is just not a thing. So this is where, the biggest opportunity for the channel for managed services lies. This is what the private equity companies are seeing. And we're all forecasting, my numbers, conservative numbers, are at least 72% growth for the SMB MSP channel in the next 4 years. So this is like a massive opportunity for us to get out there and talk about security and cloud and all the things that are complicated, make it simple and get all the end users to pay a recurring revenue fee for that.
I know that not a week goes by you don't see 2 or 3 different stories from Joe Panettiere on Channel E on the venture capital and private equity buying into managed services businesses. So definitely makes sense. How much a factor is the recurring revenue opportunity for those VC funds?
Well, massive. I mean, that is, this is the whole reason why the channel made the conversion from the break fix one-time call me when you need me revenue into the recurring revenue because all the benefits. It creates stability. It creates long-term growth. It creates better valuation for the businesses. These kinds of things. And there is a distinction between private equity and venture capital. So venture capital, they tend to be, here's a big investment to take your business to the next level, but I want my money out in a couple of years. Private equity treats it a little bit different. These are investments. They literally fold them into these actual funds, make them part of the actual company. For the sole purpose of growing and consistent growth on those businesses in the market. So when you start seeing like venture capital, you can get that as long as you've got a healthy bottom line. Private equity, these are literally strategic investments that they make into the fastest growing areas. The fact that, we're seeing not just venture capital money, but more so private equity money being invested in this space, that's an immensely positive sign for everything that we've been doing. And Brian, like you've been at this as long as I have. And I remember the days where, we were trying to get the attention of just a large vendor, forget about private equity and venture capital. Like that was hard. And now, today it's like there's a ton of like everything has kind of come to fruition. Everything is starting to really pay off, and people are starting to identify this whole managed services thing we started 20 years ago is a legitimate go-to-market strategy. So
that's a good point. I'd love to go back and look at our agenda from the original Autotest Community Live, which was what? And compare it to
building a gold, silver, bronze package, which is best for your business.
I think I remember a few of those. Yeah, some of the basics.
Oh yeah, I've delivered a few of those. So
awesome. So last time you joined us, we were discussing some of the latest threats from your Datto Global State of the Channel Ransomware Report, which has some really great detail in it. We were also talking about Ransom Cloud a little bit. One stat that really hit home for me was the average ransomware attack is 10 times costlier to the business than ransom itself. And the numbers cited were $46,800 in business expenses and an average of $4,300 demand per attack. Can you walk through us, what are some of the main costs to the business and when it comes to, the ransomware costs, that 48,000 part.
Yeah, absolutely. So as time's gone on, this ransomware report, the one that you're referencing, by the way, is I want to say it's our fourth annual report. I remember, again, 4 years ago when we first did this report, I want to say it was only about 500 MSPs that actually did the survey for us. This year, we're up to 2,500 MSPs. So it is an MSP-driven one. It's not an end-user one. The data is to be used towards positioning and talking to end users, but it's definitely SMB channel that has completed the survey. And as time's gone on with this survey, we have the ability to get a little bit smarter, a little bit more. We can more benchmark year over year and what has changed, where have the opportunities grown, what's gotten better, what's gotten worse. And one of the things that now that it's becoming more and more mature is we actually have the ability to look at the cost of downtime. And we've been talking about the cost of downtime for a long time. This is the first one where we can actually really quantify it, where we can talk about how much impact downtime has on that small, medium business. I've been talking about this a lot, and I'll tell you, as an MSP, if you're getting the objection that your prices are too expensive, this is where you can trigger and change that conversation to, let's assume you have just a simple outage and the cost of downtime around this. What happens is a lot of small businesses, and when an MSP is talking to a small business, we talk about ransomware. It is still one of the, as much as we may all be tired of hearing about it, it's still very, very prevalent. It is still one of the worst epidemics we've been dealing with. And it is ongoing. It's not going away. It's not slowing down. If anything, it is actually growing based on the numbers from this report. So a lot of times the small, medium business owner thinks, well, it's a $2,000, $3,000 attack, not a big deal. I'll just pay that, which is the idea behind the whole ransomware attack. They want to keep the dollar amount low so that you don't spend the money to try to recover using an MSP, or you don't go into your backups and do it. It's just easier and faster to pay it. And that's the reason why these amounts are that low. The problem is that the consequences are more than just the amount of ransom. And that's where the number that you're referencing. Yeah. The actual downtime, the time it takes to recover from this, not only diagnosing what the issue is, engaging with the right people and figuring out what the plan is. If you decide to pay the ransom, going through the process of buying Bitcoins or whatever currency, cyber currency you're using, there's an amount of time that it takes to do that. It's not as simple as pay it and it's done. If you decide to actually go the recovery route, then you're talking about even more downtime because you have to reconfigure the server. You need to bring down whatever data is there. Assuming you've got a file-based backup, you're going to lose some data during the process, depending on where the data is stored. Is it locally? Is it in the cloud? Is the backup encrypted? There's a whole bunch of factors that go into it. So that's why when you actually take a look at the cost of a ransomware attack, it's not just the amount of ransom, it's the amount of downtime around it. And the downtime is, as you mentioned, 10 times additional to what the actual ransomware attack is if you pay that. Right. So there's a lot more to the conversation. And here's the beautiful part about it, Brian. It goes back to the objection. If you're getting told you're too expensive, when you run through the cost of downtime with an end user, just on one simple ransomware scenario, guaranteed that downtime is more than what your managed services offering is worth. Therefore, you can change the conversation from you're too expensive to here's how much money I'm going to save you. I'm not too expensive.
Yeah, I think from the small business side, too, you always hear that is they underestimate, at least when I'm talking to MSPs, they underestimate what their downtime costs would actually be until you can go through and show them quantifiably, hey, look at all these different factors that you haven't looked at, including lost productivity and all the other things. They say, well, hey, I'm just paying that anyway. But yeah, that $4,300 average can very quickly, even if they pay it, to your point, there's still a lot of other steps they have to take, which includes going back to the original and making the investments they should have made before the ransomware attack.
Right. Exactly.
That's the hard part.
All good news for the channel, though, because there is the ability for them to go in and have these conversations intelligently with like legit data. And there's actually an example that we walked through during the ransomware report, which is the city of Atlanta. Did you get a chance to see that one?
I didn't. Actually, I didn't look through that part.
It's kind of neat. It's so we walked through the city of Atlanta got attacked with a $51,000 ransomware attack. Now that 51,000 is a little bit, a little bit higher than what you would typically see. But it was just a SamSam attack, which by the way, was a very, very small ransomware incident. I think it was less than 5% for SamSam attacks. But this one got significant coverage because it was the city of Atlanta, literally down for 5 days. And this is critical parts of their infrastructure. Very simply, like a lot of the office workers were unable to do their job. They were unable to process claims. They were unable to process rebates, those kinds of things. Yeah. Very simply, the police department, for example, they were unable to fill in police reports. They had to go back to paper and pen in order to complete police reports on incidents that were happening. So, that's literally critical shutdown time, lost productivity and all that. So over a $51,000 ransomware attack. Employees were out of the office, down, unable to work for 5 days. So that's 5 days, a whole week of people being off work. They finally returned to work 5 days later, but then they're still trying to recover certain parts of it. So not only are we talking, like, the time frame around this was the original attack was on March 22nd. They really didn't get up and going. They're still not 100% up and going, but they're pretty close to. And we're almost 8 months later, and they're still trying to figure it out. The actual total cost is actually upwards of about $17 million. $17 million is what the city of Atlanta has paid in lost productivity, technology, trying to recover from this, downtime, all those types of things. $17 million. And over a $51,000 ransomware attack. And it just, that really puts in perspective of what the damage can really be. Here's the kicker. The annual budget for the IT department for the city of Atlanta is only $34 million. So you're looking at about half of their IT budget went just to this response. And I guarantee this was not in the budget. They're literally going to take half their IT budget and take and spend it just on this one SamSam attack. Now, imagine this is a small business, not the city of Atlanta. That is out of business type numbers that we're talking about. This is why if we can translate this stuff back to the SMB market, this is why MSPs are winning. And that's why security is such an important conversation today.
Makes you wonder too, with even if it was a smaller municipality that happened to, is can you imagine going to the taxpayers and saying, we need to raise your taxes next year because we got a ransomware attack? That would be
yeah, exactly.
That'd be very embarrassing, I think.
Well, the city of Atlanta had to go back to the taxpayers. I mean, it's inevitable. They have no choice. Their budget is fixed. Their budget is they're going to have to spend that on technology because that's what they forecasted. So where does that money come from? Yeah, it's got to come from taxpayers. Yeah. We've actually seen a couple incidents like that. In small town Canada, there was a couple actually in the province of Ontario, real small towns. And you're exactly right. They had to go back to the taxpayers, to pay for some of this.
Yeah, bigger cities, I think the politicians are good at gleaming it over, but in some of the smaller places, yeah, they'll be a little more upfront, I think, with that part. But
oh yeah, for sure.
Interesting. So another point I gleaned from the ransomware report was, and I think this is a really good one for MSPs to use, is 96% of businesses with a disaster recovery solution in place fully recover their operations. And I'm assuming the effective would be an important term to have in there too, because just having a disaster recovery solution doesn't mean it's done right.
No, absolutely. And that's again, it goes back to the whole, why would I outsource my IT? Yep. Having a proper plan in place, that's the value out of a managed service provider. That's why they're going to pay you per month for your services. It's not just for the technology around it, but for an actual plan of attack. This is the, letting them sleep well at night. This goes beyond you just going and buying a simple backup solution kind of thing.
I mean, without going through the whole thing, but how can MSPs ensure their clients are covered in the event of a ransomware attack or other data damaging type event too? It's not just ransomware, I know, that they need to restore from.
No. I mean, obviously, there's a ton of other threats and attacks that are out there between the emails, the phishing emails, the malware, spam, tons of different viruses, adware, all that stuff. This is all the value add. What the difference is, and I know you guys have been doing a ton of work around this as well, is in essence, it's messaging. We need to change the messaging away from, I'm going to sell you some technology that's going to prevent viruses from coming in. all the way to, I have a security plan for you guys. And here's the security plan. Here's the stack. And it's most of the stack is of what their MSPs are already doing. It's just repositioning it as, I'm going to make sure that all these things are set up and dialed in, and we're going to test it on a regular basis. And we're going to make sure the backups are good. And all this is part of my monthly fee. And here's my monthly fee for that. What's going to happen? What's the end result? I'm going to eliminate downtime. Every time you hear in the news that somebody else is being attacked or losing data or their customer data has been scraped and sold on the dark web. Every time, you hear about another business that's being shut down as a result of this or whatever hits the news, you don't have to worry about it because I've got your back and this is what you're going to pay me for per month. And there's huge value in that, massive value in that.
So beyond the solution to the policies, the planning, the testing, the over-testing in some cases, that is a definite value add. I know that IoTSSA, we've been promoting that as well in a variety of ways, but it's always...
I think there's also a value add to taking the amount of technology that's out there and simplifying it. Not only that, but and MSPs need to continue to have this conversation is, what happens if one of the vendors that you're using goes out of business, is not the right solution anymore, has a significant breach? We've seen that a few times now. We, like just at Datto, we have a CISO on board, and our CISO literally tests everything we do internally and externally, and everything our partners do, all of our integrations, all of our technologies, all of our code, to make sure that it's secure. There's not a lot of vendors that can afford or have invested in a CISO. So what happens if, and we've seen these in the news, right? Where MSPs, because MSPs are under attack, because now you have access to how many end users. So why would the hackers go after the MSP? Well, if one of your vendors has exposed code, or if one of your vendors hasn't followed up and made sure that they're secure, now all of a sudden, you're the one left holding the bag. So part of the value out of what an MSP does is you're staying on top of this. You're making sure you've got the right stack. You could pivot away from one stack to another stack, or one technology to another technology should things change. And, that's, again, it's all part of this value add. Whereas an end user that's manufacturing and selling widgets doesn't have time or should even stay on top of this stuff.
That makes sense. So Rob, we talk about, you have the Datto's Global State of the Channel Ransomware Report. CompTIA has cybersecurity reports that come out regularly. You see a lot more of these channel tools available. What other resources can MSPs use to move the needle with their stubborn clients? In other words, what sales and marketing methods work best to get businesses that haven't implemented effective backup and recovery solutions to take that final step?
So I think ultimately, and I wish vendors did a better job at this. We're constantly creating tools for MSPs to go and use and have conversations, because from a sales and marketing perspective, you're going to have to touch a prospect. I think the new numbers are between 9 and 12 times before they're actually ultimately going to buy something from you. Right. That means that you need to come up with 9 to 12 different ways, different mediums, different things that you're either emailing, calling about, webinars about, at events about, whatever the case may be. So you need to constantly have newer stuff that you can actually talk about. For us, just as a hardcore example, and you're right, Brian, there's a lot of reports that are out there, and these reports are great. Ours are designed, and CompTIA does the same, it's designed to be white labeled, where you can actually, use it to have a conversation with an end user. It is a sales tool. Ours, you can actually put your own logos on it and make it your own report rather than one, from Datto, for example. So even if you're not a Datto user, you can still use this report. We have a downtime calculator that still is the most popular tool I would suggest it's ever been created in the managed services space, period. Because in 30 seconds, you can calculate the cost of downtime for an end user. Like, that's immensely powerful when you can have that level of conversation where you change it to a finance conversation. So that one is one that we still continue to update and offer out for free to the entire community, not just Datto users, another white labeled tool. There's more recently, and you talked about it, we talked about it in the last podcast, and it's been wildly popular, where we actually have a demo of a hacker, Kevin Mitnick, breaking into the cloud and ransoming, putting ransomware in the actual cloud. Really cool stuff. It's about a 5-minute video, and it's designed for MSPs to use as a commercial to show how scary the world is. And I think that's what we want to do. And I don't buy in. There's a lot of people, and I've heard it a couple of times, don't use fear to sell, which for me is actually kind of ridiculous, because the reason why any human being makes a buying decision is ultimately because of fear. And it comes from many different levels of fear, but fear is the ultimate motivator here. So absolutely you want to use fear. The key is you can't fear monger, meaning everything in the world is scary, but I don't have a solution for you. I want to hear, here's all the fear, here's all the things that you need to be concerned about. By the way, I am an MSP and I can save you from these things. So absolutely leverage and use fear. And like the ransomware or ransom cloud video that we've got is one of those, the cost of downtime, the ransomware report, all the different types of malicious attacks that are happening every single day to every single end user. Like, talk about that stuff. And by the way, if you pay me X amount of dollars, you'll make sure none of that hits you. You'll sleep well at night knowing you're protected. So, what I would do if I was an MSP, I would contact each of my vendors and I would say, what have you got for me? What can I leverage? What can I use? Plan out your 9 to 12 touches, your 9 to 12, emails, whatever it is, out to your prospects, and have your vendors do the heavy lifting. I got a ton of stuff that MSPs can use, but let your vendors do the heavy lifting.
That makes perfect sense. And to your point, is making it real for the clients too, is bringing it back. You mentioned the solution is making it the right solution that fits in, or relaying that, hey, here's what happened to this company and how it could happen to you too. Because there's so many that are just still looking at, well, I'm not Target, I'm not Home Depot, but it's happening to SMBs, it's happening to communities like Atlanta, it's happening to smaller communities in Atlanta too, is finding those local examples. And it's not always easy because they're not being published a lot, but we try to grab whatever we can find and use within IoTSSA too. So a lot of the blogs and things we try to promote, hey, here are some good examples.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got the same. Like we literally have case studies from small businesses, small education companies, small guys that literally, I'll be out of business if I can't recover from this. And then the story behind the MSP doing it. So task your vendors with finding that stuff.
Well, we're 3 months into 2019, and I know last year was the year of GDPR, it seems like. But now we have many states, including California, Vermont, Colorado, looking to implement data privacy laws, even similar to what GDPR is. How difficult is it for MSPs to keep up with these changes? And should we expect a national law in the U.S. or I'm not even sure in Canada if they have something similar yet?
They do. Here's the thing, Brian.
Yeah.
Pretty much every country in the free world has a law. The United States is behind.
Yeah.
It's Canada has had something implemented for a couple of years. Australia has a pretty wicked one. So actually, I'm doing a presentation in Nashville this week, and part of my presentation is showing what the Australian data breach laws and rules are. And what happens is, you have to, if you have a data breach, it's the same in Canada, you have to report it. By law, you have to report it. It doesn't matter the size of your business or whatnot. Canada takes it one step further, where the government will decide whether you need to go public with the breach that you've had or not. So do you need to publicly disclose that you've had a breach? That's pretty scary when the government is actually deciding these things. Now, when you look at Australia, the great part about their report is every single quarter they come out with a report on the breaches. They don't say who, but they talk about how, what it looks like, where they're coming from, these kinds of things. So you're getting some great analytics that are coming from these things. Now, why do I bring this up in a presentation in front of Americans? Because this is what our future looks like.
Sure.
And if we can start preparing our end users for the day when data breaches are going to be part of law and reporting it as part of law, and we're not far off. Like I mentioned, every other country, every other English-speaking country that does IT has some form of law right now. The United States is behind. That's going to be a super cool opportunity for us here in the United States. But if you're ahead of the game and you know what these potential laws and regulations and compliance are going to look like, you're going to look like a genius when it finally does hit and people go into full-blown panic mode. Now, GDPR, if you stayed anywhere near it and watched the Europeans, they they got bombarded with a ton of GDPR scare tactics and fear mongering and vendors trying to sell you stuff, and that will happen here. The key is if you're ahead of it and already prepared for it, you don't need to worry about that. You don't need to worry about is this guy right? Is this guy wrong? Should I trust this guy or not? Because we see this all the time. We saw it when HIPAA was implemented years ago, and all that. So, it's, I think being prepared and understanding at least what's going on in other markets can only make us better when we finally figure out what's going to happen here. But yeah.
Some smart person, it may have been you, maybe somebody else, had told me that the best practice for MSPs is to go the highest standard at this point, that, looking at some of the data laws and ensuring the clients are up on that, because it'll make it much easier as other states implement it. I mean, if you're an MSP covering 3 states and all 3 states have different rules, you've got to look at going towards the toughest standards in there in order to keep your sanity. But even going beyond that is looking at what potential laws would be. That's look ahead is the advice.
It's perfect example of this. I mean, we're not a publicly traded company. We're a private company. But the way we run our finance team is the same laws as if you were a publicly traded company. Why do we do that? Because that is best practices, and if we're operating like that and for whatever reason we decide we want to go public, or, if you guys are running using GDPR regulations or data breach laws from Australia or the Canadian laws, if you're running with those things today, when it does happen, you're ready to go. You understand it. You're ahead of the game. If anything, you can probably look like an expert and sell your ideas and knowledge to other MSPs.
Very cool. Hey, do you have any idea, is there a central place that MSPs in the United States can find the details of all the relevant data privacy rules and regulations now? Is there a central place?
Not that I'm aware of. It's funny because I have a URL for the Australian one that I use if anybody wants to go get the report themselves, because they actually are available to the general public at no cost. The problem is the URL is like, the government, right? It's not designed to be, hey, grab report at, it's like a stupid long URL with backslashes and stuff like that. What I would do is I would just simply try to find the government site around GDPR. I would try to find the government site around Australia data breach laws. I'm trying to remember what Canada calls it specifically. I think it's an extension of the CASL, CASTL rules. But if not, just Canadian data breach laws, and find the government site, not any of the guys that are trying to sell you something around it. And I would be super careful, this whole MSP to MSSP, just because you understand compliance doesn't mean that you are compliant. And, I think anybody that deals with HIPAA knows that. So I think it's just be super careful with also the messaging around it, but also, that familiarity, that awareness will definitely pay off in the future.
Awesome. So before we close out, how can our listeners access your ransomware report, for one thing, and then also where do they find or get the ability to sign up for DattoCon, whether it's US or Europe?
Yeah, I've got one, I talk about simplicity. I've got one site or one email that you can go to that'll give you access to all the tools, the RPO calculator, which is the cost of downtime, the ransomware report, that Kevin Mitnick video. It's all free, and you don't have to do a demo or sign up for Datto services or anything like that. It's all white labeled, so go and rip it off, take it, go and use it, go and make some money with it, even if it doesn't work into Datto sales. Our goal is to grow the community overall. So if you send an email to tools@datto.com, you'll get a bounce back, like an out of office response with direct access to them. So you don't have to wait. You don't have to give me any of your contact info. You can literally get direct access to those tools immediately. So that's tools@datto.com. If you're interested in coming to DattoCon, again, you don't need to be a Datto user. This is 2.5 days of MSP driven content. Most of the content on stage is our partners and MSPs talking about their businesses, not just how they sell Datto or backup or RMM or anything like that. So that's dattocon.com. That'll get you both to the San Diego as well as the Paris site. And I can't encourage you enough to go. And if you have questions about it, my email address is rob@datto.com. Happy to take any questions that you guys might have.
Very cool. Any final thoughts before we close out today, Rob?
No, man. I mean, we talked about a lot of things and appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about this.
Great. Well, on behalf of IoTSSA, I'd like to thank Rob Rae from Datto for joining us today. And for those who tuned in to listen to our discussion, I'd also like to encourage you to take a few extra minutes and check out all the great cybersecurity content on the association's website, IoTSSA.com. Thanks again, and please have a fantastic and highly profitable day.